Well, good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the first of this season's online roadshows. I'm Sarah Frost, Naturetrek's marketing manager, and I'm joined tonight by my colleague Paul Stanbury.
Hello, good evening.
Now, for anyone who's new to our roadshows and joining us for the first time, we're a family-owned wildlife tour operator based in Hampshire, and next month we'll have been operating for 39 years, and we run wildlife holidays all over the world. And over this coming season of our roadshows, our expert staff and tour leaders will be taking us to some fantastic destinations for wildlife, all for you to enjoy from the comfort of your own home. So do sign up for as many as you would like. Our in-person roadshow is also up and running, and we've already been presenting in Winchester, Exeter, and at Slimbridge Wetlands Reserve, with much more to come in January. So tonight, for our first one, we're going to be taking you to Baja, California, and the polar regions. We're very happy to answer questions at the end. So any questions that you do have, please just pop them into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, which might be at the top of your screen if you're on an iPad. And we'll now make a start. So to properly introduce myself, if my cursor will let me advance, here we go. Just a quick introduction of what I do for those of you who don't know me. I work in the Naturetrek head office, and I specialize in guiding our cruisers. So I guide in Scotland, in the Maldives, in Indonesia, the Arctic, Antarctica, the Azores, and Baja, California. Now, the unique thing about our cruises is that they're private charters. So we have total control over the boat. We fill them with like-minded wildlife enthusiasts, and we crew them with expert naturalist guides. And importantly, they depart at the right time of year for wildlife. Furthermore, they're small boat charters, so the image of a cruise can connotate images of 1,000 or 2,000 passengers on a huge ship, but not with a Naturetrek trip. We're talking usually 15 to 25 people, depending on the size of the vessel. For the polar regions, it's typically between 50 and 100. For this one, the tour I'm going to be talking to you about this evening is 25. So let's head over to Baja. So just so you can get your bearings, this is the peninsula of Baja, California. If I just use my cursor here, you can see it down here. So we fly to San Diego, and then we fly back from the bottom of the peninsula. Now, Baja, California has long been described as the Galapagos of Mexico. From the Pacific pounded shores on its western coastline round to its sheltered blue waters in the Sea of Cortez, the peninsula is one of the longest in the world at 1,200 kilometers in length, and it's home to a diversity of wildlife that could easily rival Darwin's more famous islands over 1,600 kilometers to the south. Now, our route takes us from San Diego and into Mexico, down the peninsula and into the Sea of Cortez, and we fly back from Cabo San Lucas. So just to see this route in more detail, our cruise offers a really comprehensive exploration of the peninsula and plenty of stop-offs to do birding on shore, as well as, of course, birding and wildlife watching from the boat. And the coast of Baja, California offers arguably the best cetacean watching in the world. And that's partly because it includes both the Pacific coast of the peninsula with its many sheltered bays, and the Sea of Cortez on the east side as well, which is a waterway of deep underwater canyons and sea mounts, which together usher up nutrients to the surface. So it makes it a really rich feeding area. So before we actually get on board, we spend a night in San Diego, and then we go birding for a day with the Audubon Society, or folk can relax. Most folk opt to join the birding trip, and there's lots to see. I'm going to skip over these images really fairly quickly, but just to give you a little idea of the things that we could see on our first day in San Diego. We firstly go to a nearby lake called Lindo Lake, where we can see black-crowned night herons, house finches, grackles, western bluebird, Nuttall's woodpecker in the trees by the lake, usually great egrets in the tops of the trees, and ground squirrels scurrying between their burrows, or sometimes just basking in the sun. And the highlight when I was there was seeing a fabulous male wood duck with a female on the lake, which you can see here. It's crisp plumage, looking really very smart in the dazzling sunshine. And we then go up into the mountains to a spot called Silverwood, which is an Audubon reserve to the north of the city. And we can sit in the shade and have a picnic lunch and watch Anna's hummingbirds flitting around on the feeders, and go for a short walk, possibly see turkey vulture, Cooper's hawk, and northern flickers. And then we'll also stop along the San Diego River estuary, where we'll look for waders and herons. They're abundant here. We might see semi-palmated plover, bufflehead, Hudsonian whimbrel, which was split a couple of years ago from the European whimbrel, long-billed curlew and marbled godwit, amongst other things. And that evening, we'll board our vessel, which is known as the Searcher, from the lovely Fisherman's Wharf harbour. This is a photograph of it here, which I took at sunrise. Thanks to jet lag, I was wide awake, so could go out and have a nice little sunrise walk. And this is our vessel home for the next 2 weeks. So we'll head south and travel through the night, and we wake up in Mexico. And this is the vessel here, just a brief deck plan. It's very comfortable, takes 25 passengers. Small cabins, you don't spend any time in there other than to change and to sleep. But it makes for a really lovely community feel in the saloon area. We should start seeing birds as soon as we've departed. Brown pelicans, they're really common along the coastline, and they can be quite confident. We actually had a juvenile hop on board when I was guiding this trip a couple of years ago. You can see this one just over my shoulder, hopped on board and joined us for a little while. 2 species of albatross, which we'd certainly hope to see. There's black-footed, which is pictured here. Very few species that are dark all over, light around the bill. And Laysan albatross. Both of these are northern species of albatross. And these, the Laysan albatross breed in Hawaii, including the island of Laysan, where the first specimen was described. But they range widely across the northern Pacific. And in fact, the oldest known bird, wild bird, is a Laysan albatross. It was an adult female which was ringed on Midway Island in Hawaii in 1956. And as they don't breed until they're 5 years old, she must have hatched in 1951 or earlier. And she was still rearing a chick as recently as 2021, when she was at least 70. So quite remarkable birds. We'll see some familiar birds such as sooty shearwaters, but also unfamiliar ones such as Cassin's auklet, which I've pictured here. And these birds nest underground in underground burrows on islands, and the pair will take it in turns to incubate, and they change shifts in the dead of the night to avoid predators because gulls would have them. And they're unique among northern hemisphere seabirds in that they sometimes have a second brood. And all of the seabirds being strictly single-brooded. It was named after John Cassin, who lived from 1813 to 69. He was an American ornithologist who described 198 species of bird, really quite impressive. Herman's gull as well. This is a photo here of it in its breeding plumage, and they look really lovely, smoky grey bodies, contrasting pure white head and this lovely lipstick red bill. And as we're spending so much time out at sea, we'd hope to see our first whales. We've got a breaching humpback here, yeah, leaping up right up in front of the boat. It can always take us by surprise. It's really difficult to tear yourself away from the front of the boat because you never know what's going to appear. Lots of phalaropes we should be seeing as well. It's actually been found from tracking that red-necked phalaropes that breed in Shetland cut across America and they winter on the Pacific. So the phalaropes that we see out in Mexico could well be Shetland birds amongst the ones that we see. They often see red-necked, but also see grey phalaropes as well. They'll always be in their winter plumage. And they breed in the high Arctic, but they winter mainly along the edge of the continental shelf off the west coast of Africa, South America. Yeah, lovely little bird. Their scientific name, Phalaropus follicularis, translates as coot-footed or like a coot, and this refers to the little lobed coot-like feet, toes that they have, which help them paddle in the water. And our first stop to be able to actually get off and land and explore is a spot called San Benito. Lovely warm weather. It's just a great place to spend February or March, a lovely time of year to be away. So we come here to stretch our legs, but also to meet the local residents. So this is a colony of northern elephant seals which live here. This is a different species from those down in Falklands or South Georgia, which is southern elephant seals. So there's a little fishing village, only operational during the abalone season. So the seals just take over and that you just see them sleeping in the streets. Now the males look particularly unattractive, but the females I think can look quite sweet, really quite endearing there, just looking at the camera. It's also a spot where we can see the San Benito's sparrow. This has recently been split from the Savannah sparrow. It's now a unique species which only occurs on San Benito's island. It's fortunately quite common, not that difficult to see hopping around. Also, wandering tattler. Now, these breed in Alaska, but they winter over rocky shores all along the coast of America and Mexico too. They're fairly unusual in that the whole bird is grey, including the rump and the tail, so they don't have wing bars, etc. Lots of osprey as well. We often see several pairs on the nests and see them flying quite low over our heads and hunting around in the area. Fur seals. Now, this is the Guadalupe fur seal. There are only two places on the planet where these fur seals breed. There's Guadalupe Island, which is about 200 miles off the coast of the peninsula, which we won't be going near, and San Benitos, which is where we're visiting. They were hunted to almost extinction, and only a handful survived, but with strict protection, they've been able to build up reasonable numbers again, which is great. Waders too. Now this is a black turnstone here. There's only two species of turnstone on the planet. The ruddy turnstone, or just a turnstone, breeds right around the Arctic and it winters on coasts very widely, including Britain. Now the black turnstone, which we've got here, is much more restricted and it breeds only near the coast in Alaska. And it's when it's not breeding, it's found on rocky shores right down the Pacific coast and as far as Baja. And they're actually reputed to be quite aggressive around their nests, and they'll attack birds which are much larger than themselves, like skuas or gulls. And in their summer plumage, it's much blacker with some white patches on the face, so blacker than we see them here. Back out on the water, we continue sailing south in the peninsula looking for cetaceans. This is a common sight for me as a guide. Got people peering out in the front of the boat looking at whatever we've found. And we've found something quite special in this moment because we had a pod of dolphins just bombing through the water over to the bow. And we had Pacific white-sided dolphins, and they just bash across the waves and come onto the bow to ride along the water with the boat, which is just fantastic. Can also get superpods of common dolphins, and for decades we've had two species of common dolphin. There's short-beaked dolphin, which seems to be a more oceanic species in deeper water. This is the one we get in Europe and the UK. And long-beaked common dolphin, found in tropical coastal waters, never been recorded in Europe. However, they've now been classed as the same species, so just different races living within different ranges. There's long-beaked here. Bottlenose dolphins too, which might bow ride. They're quite boisterous, love to play around boats and show off. They're really what I call a crowd-pleasing dolphin, usually one that people are most familiar with. Fantastic sightings of fin whales I've had along Baja as well. This is the second largest whale on the earth after the blue whale. They're quite unusual in that they have an asymmetrical face. So their jaw on the lower right-hand side is white, which you can see here. So you might be thinking, well, how on earth are we going to be able to see that underwater? Well, on this cruise you can, because we were able to get so close to the animals, and we've just got such a small boat that we're really not disturbing them at all. So we had this fin whale just come straight up in front of us and got a fantastic view of it. Really rather wonderful. And then we reach, after 3 days of traveling, San Ignacio Lagoon. And this coastal lagoon is where grey whales have access to it from the Pacific Ocean. And this is what most people come to Baja, California for, the grey whales. And there are hundreds of them in this lagoon. Now, there are two reasons that they're here. One, to mate, and second, to have their calves. So if I just show this little diagram on the screen here, you can see their sort of breeding behavior and the life cycle and the calendar year, if you like, of a grey whale and what they're doing. So almost all of the world's grey whales travel down the Pacific coast of the US and spend the winter in these lagoons where they'll mate and give birth. So the males will come to mate and the females will come to give birth. And then they go all the way back up to Alaska to feed in the north in the cold waters. And the reason they do this is that the babies really don't have much blubber at all. So if they were born in the cold waters, they'd die. They wouldn't be able to stay warm. And the females don't typically mate if they're already bearing a calf. They'll have a calf, sort of one calf every 2 to 3 years. So it's 3,000 miles from their feeding grounds in Alaska down to San Ignacio Lagoon. And when they're in the lagoon, they quite like to approach boats. And this is something that's really quite remarkable and unique to this area. And some of the whales come over to the boats, some of them don't. We observe that they have different personalities, and we go out to find the friendliest ones. Most of them are. Some say a quick hello and go again. Others want real interaction. It seems very odd as a trained zoologist to be touching a wild animal, because it goes against everything that you believe that you should do. You don't want to change the behavior of a species. You just want to observe it respectfully. But quite simply, if you don't tickle and scratch these whales, they will just swim along to a boat that will. And if you look at this next picture, just tell me that this whale isn't enjoying itself. It's closing its eye and rolling around on its side and just absolutely loving the attention. This is a young calf here, rolling around like a puppy, and loving just being scrubbed. Absolutely wonderful, amazing experience. Now, these whales only started coming up to boats in 1976. Researchers assumed that we must be interfering with them, so they moved away, and the whales just kept following the boats out of curiosity and approaching them. Really just astonishing. Oh, my slide doesn't want to move. There we go. And this is an opportunity where you can really get eyeballed by a grey whale. And note the white patches on them, which are barnacles. They've got lots of barnacles and sea lice on them. I took this photograph here just with my iPhone. I just had my phone in my pocket and this whale just popped up because they're so close. Having a big lens doesn't really help you in these situations. And I love this next photograph. It was quite funny. Got some clients in a boat there looking completely the other way, and this whale comes up and is spy hopping next to them. And this is the behavior that they do, so they can lift their eye above the water and actually see what's going on above the surface. So who is watching who? We've got the whale here just having a really good eyeball at these the people. Just so, yeah, great opportunities to look at them and to interact with them. And I had a wonderful moment where a whale came over to me and it's lifted its head up towards me, and I did what any self-respecting zoologist would do. Well, it gave me a kiss, but I obliged and gave it a little kiss back. And this mother and calf just seemed really particularly taken with us, which was just fantastic. And I've just got a little video here which I can share with you. And see this calf just playing with us around the boat. And its mother is just in the background there, just watching over it. Just really, really fascinating. I've got so much footage of that. I could keep showing it for ages, but in the interest of keeping time up, I'll continue. We have to tear ourselves away from the lagoon, but we'll stay there for a couple of days. And alongside the bay, this lagoon, are mangroves, so we can go into them to do some birding, and they're just full of herons, waders, reddish egrets, tricolored herons, black-crowned night herons, yellow-crowned night herons, marbled godwits, long-billed curlews, lots of royal terns, plus Caspian terns as well, and elegant terns. So I've got a photograph here with some different species in. Got willet, short-billed doucher, marbled godwit, and belted kingfisher. Mangroves are breeding grounds for fish. So where you have lots of fish, it's going to attract lots of things that feed on fish. And the belted kingfisher is a giant in comparison to the small European kingfisher, which weighs about 40 grams, whereas the belted kingfisher is about almost 4 times heavier at about 150 grams. Reddish egret. Apparently reddish egret is North America's rarest heron. There are fewer than 2,000 breeding pairs in the USA, and most of them are in Texas, but they also nest in Central America and the Caribbean and Mexico. And they've got a famously energetic feeding style. They dash about and fan their wings to reduce glare before stabbing their prey, and they'll catch fish, amphibians, and crayfish. The ones in Baja are actually a subspecies. They're darker than the birds elsewhere in the range. Black-crowned night heron, which I've already mentioned. Mangrove warbler, this is a lovely little gem. This only inhabits tropical mangroves on the coast of the Americas. It's totally resident in this habitat, doesn't migrate. And at high tide, they usually remain hidden in the evergreen mangrove foliage, but at low tide, they can sometimes be seen on the roots and mud. But the trouble is, the mangroves are most easily accessed by boat when the tide is high, so it can be tricky to see them, but it's just fabulous when we do. And then, unfortunately, we leave the lagoon after a couple of days, though, so we've really got our whale's worth, had a lot of whale therapy, if you like. And we'll leave the lagoon and head south to warmer waters. There's lots of frigate birds fighting over fish. Red-billed tropic birds, and they're about 1 meter from bill to tail, but just over half of that length comprises this amazing elongated central tail feathers. And we also hope to see whale sharks. And this is strictly regulated. But if the population's doing well, then we can go to a lagoon where we can see them and hopefully snorkel with them. This is the largest fish in the world. So if the weather's calm enough, we're able to get in the water with them. It's typically young males. And then we can swim with them. So I've just got a little video here to show you. And the whale shark is so large that you just can't get it all in your camera. Even though I've got a wide angle lens here, I just can't fit the entire animal in. And this is only a juvenile, maybe sort of 5 or 6 meters. But you have to swim quite hard to keep up with them. They're going along at a very nice, gentle pace. You've got to just gently feeding. And the coloration that you see in the water there, this is a client swimming alongside one. What you see in the water there, what looks like bits of snow and the poor visibility, is actually why the whale shark is there, because it's feeding on lots of plankton. So it's a really rich feeding area for them. And for those who don't want to snorkel, you might still be able to see them from the boat, which the conservation organization takes us out on. Continuing south, we can also see sperm whales. Now, sperm whales love areas where there are deep underwater canyons, so this is a great place for them. They're deep divers. They feed on squid, and we've got a group of males here resting after a dive, so they can be down for about 90 minutes. So they come up and they'll log on the surface for 20 minutes, half an hour, to replenish their oxygen stores before going down again. And they use a series of clicks as part of their echolocation. So they make lots of clicks through the water, and they use this to track down their food. And if you imagine, once you're beyond a depth of 40 meters or so, you know, it's pitch black, regardless of whether it's day or night. So they really need sophisticated echolocation. And because these animals dive to depths of 2,000 meters, it needs to be particularly good. And it's said that the sperm whale is the loudest animal on the planet. And if it's said that if a scuba diver, is clicked at by a sperm whale, it's like being kicked in the chest by a horse. And one of my friends out in the Azores was actually coming back from a dive with blue sharks, so out in open water, came back, and a young sperm whale came alongside him and was clicking at him, sort of being a bit curious and investigating him. And he got his hand and he pushed his nose away, the nose of the sperm whale away, because it was coming too close. And he lost a sensation in his hand for 2 weeks just from the vibration of the echolocation from this young sperm whale. Absolutely remarkable. And they've got an enormous head. They are just natural submarines. They're built for deep diving. The head is a third of the size of their body, and it's the size of a car, just their head. And they have depressions in their flanks where they've got these lovely paddle-shaped fins flush to their body, and their rib cages will collapse under pressure when they dive down, to these depths of 2,000 kilometers or so. Surfacing 40 meters later, 40 minutes later, completely unharmed. It's just phenomenal. If a human did that, you just simply wouldn't be able to do it. So we'll continue exploring on land as well, and enjoy little morning walks, day walks. Got some frigate birds circling over the cliffs here, so we can run ashore to get out and explore the desert wildlife. So we'll look for such birds such as the roadrunner. These are a huge ground-dwelling cuckoo, surprisingly iridescent in good light with purple and green tones on the wings and the tail. Usually seen on the ground in quite sort of dry desert habitats with patches of thick vegetation, sometimes perch on fences or rocks, especially when they're singing. And they'll run swiftly after large insects, lizards, or other prey. I was quite delighted to find a fossilized turtle while we were out exploring. So my guests and I really enjoyed marveling at that. Here's another angle of it with our boat in the background. So you just never know what you're going to find exploring these truly remote areas. There's no one else around whatsoever. And for anyone who's interested in geology, it's just a fascinating place to visit, because we can look at the layers of sediment on the rocks here, and it is just teeming with shells, not fossils, but shells, from all of the layers of sediment that have been laid down over thousands and thousands of years. Lovely cacti as well to explore, and keep an eye out on the cacti, because birds do like to come along and perch on them. Cactus wren, This is the scarce Santu's hummingbird. It's an endemic. It only occurs on the Baja Peninsula, and males have got a black and orange bill with this black little face mask and white eyebrow. This one was feeding on some red hot poker flowers. We have an opportunity to snorkel a couple of times as well. It's quite cold. It's not like sort of the Maldives or Indonesia if you've been snorkeling there, but it's certainly warmer than the UK. Nice things to see, like this little puffer fish here. And also we go snorkeling with sea lions. Now, sea lions have absolutely no sense of personal space, as I discovered when I went snorkeling with them. It's just having a little scratch, quite amazing and wonderful to be able to be with and just to immerse ourselves in their world for a short time. They're really very inquisitive. They'll come along and have a little play with you. And see what you're up to. They'll blow bubbles at each other. You can see some of them blowing bubbles at each other there. And yeah, just fantastic. And my colleague was out here a couple of years ago and he found some sea lions that were playing with a football. This is my friend Tim Melling, and he took these photographs. He was leading the trip and they thought, well, how on earth have they got a football? And then he realized it wasn't a football at all. It was a completely disgruntled guinea fowl pufferfish. You can see it really doesn't look very pleased whatsoever, but these sea lions were just playing with it. And absolutely loving throwing it around. Poor thing. Here we go. But we'll continue exploring on different islands, go on shore again for lots of walks, which will reveal some other desert bird life which you might not have seen yet, such as northern cardinal. This is a striking, actually familiar backyard bird for people who live in North America. Also occurs in southwestern US and extensively in Mexico. And it'll frequently visit bird feeders. So what a bird. You just imagine having that coming to your bird feeder. Really just marvelous creature. Scott's orioles as well. Hooded orioles. Costa's hummingbirds. This photo is taken by a client. Really lovely photo there. Loggerhead turtles, which we can see. And we get to the southern tip of Baja, and this is where all the humpback whales breed, the spot called Gorda Banks. And you can, so many opportunities to take photographs of breaching humpbacks. You don't usually get a photo on the first breach, so you get a photograph on the third or fourth breach, and they're doing lots of surface behavior. So fin slaps with their pectoral fins, head banging, tail slaps, and the huge males here showing off to the females and competing with other males. And we also really hope to see the largest animal on the planet, the blue whale. They can easily be detected from a great distance by their enormous blow, which can be up to 12 meters in height. They have a lung capacity of about 5,000 liters, so it's not surprising they can therefore put out a huge blow. And their heart alone is the size of a small car, and their tongue can weigh up to 4 tons, which is the same as an African elephant. A small child could actually swim through their arteries. Now, the length of blue whale as well can be a bit misleading. They get up to 33 meters, but it's a bit like saying that humans get up to almost 9 feet, because that's the world record for the tallest man ever lived, being 8 foot and sort of 9 inches or something. They're typically more about 27 meters in length, but this is still a really enormous animal. Their Latin name, Balanoptera musculus, well, Balanoptera means winged whale, but musculus means muscle in French. So winged whale with a lot of muscle, but there's a double meaning. It also means, musculus also means mouse in English. And it's thought that Carl Linnaeus, who named the species in 1758, had known the double meaning and used it as a bit of irony, naming the largest animal in the world after one of the smallest. And he was showing that even in the 1700s, they had a sense of humor. So under bright light, the species can appear bluish, but usually they're more grey, which can cause them to be mistaken with other baleen whales. But they have lovely mottled skin. We're amazed to see so many of them close to the boat. We had one blue whale blow, another blue whale blow, another blue whale, and we ended up with 15 around the boat, which is just absolutely staggering. And you can see their classic mottled skin, which they have here as well. Very small dorsal fin. The reason it's so small is by the time you're that large, it's completely redundant. You don't need a dorsal fin to retain balance in the water. Ocean sunfish as well. The scientific name is mola mola, which people also call them as their common name. A mola is a grinding stone, a millstone. So if you think of your teeth like a molar, the name refers to the fish's round, grey and rough appearance, which is similar to a millstone. You sometimes get terns landing on them, and they let parasites, they let the terns pick parasites off them and things, which is quite fun to watch. Spine-tailed mobula rays, also known as giant devil rays, are something that we'd hope to see as well. They're circumtropical. They're widely spread around all oceans and adjacent seas, often extending their range into warm tropical latitudes. There's masses of them. One will leap and land with a splat, and then it sets off a chain reaction, and you suddenly just have loads leaping and jumping and splatting, which is exactly what happened for us. And we had an astonishing morning where we had them in this density here on every side of the boat as far as we could see. We travelled slowly at about 4 knots, passing them in this density for an hour. And the skipper and crew had said he had them in a mile in every direction on his sonar. The crew had never seen anything like it. So really phenomenal to see them. I think it was part of a migration that they were doing. So just fantastic to see something like this. And from here, we sail off into the sunset and depart from Cabo St. Lucas, the southern tip of the peninsula, the next morning. So as is tradition, I'll end on a sunset here. But if any of you are interested in coming along with us to Baja, California, just to save you hopping onto the website, I can show our dates and prices there. We have one space available for our 2025 trip, departing in March, which I'm guiding. It's a space for a female to share. For that one. So do inquire if you're interested, but plenty of availability for 2026. So thank you very much for listening. And I'm now going to hand you over to Paul. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you. I'm now going to take you to a couple of slightly chillier destinations. So starting up in the north, up in the high Arctic, in Svalbard and Spitsbergen, and then going about as far south as you can go down to Antarctica to show you some of the wildlife and landscapes of the Antarctic realm. My name is Paul Stanbury. I work here in the Naturetrek office. I'm here in the Naturetrek office actually this evening doing this talk. I've been with the company now 28 years, so quite a while. I look after a lot of our polar cruises, and been fortunate to go to both Spitsbergen on a few occasions and down to Antarctica as well. So, but starting here on and Spitsbergen, land of the polar bear. So where is Svalbard? So Svalbard is about 600 miles to the north of North Norway, up in the Barents Sea. It's the most easily accessible part of the high Arctic for us. Is just a flight from the UK over to Oslo, overnight in Oslo, and then from there you fly up to Svalbard on a direct flight with Scandinavian Airlines on not just a normal Boeing 737 type Airbus type aircraft. So Spitsbergen is the largest island in the Svalbard archipelago. Svalbard meaning actually cold coast in Norwegian, in Norse. It's the largest of the 4 main islands in the Svalbard archipelago. So Spitsbergen, Nordauslandet, Northeast Island, Barentsøya and Edgeøya on the eastern side. Over 60% of the land area is covered in ice. You are really up in the high Arctic here. The 80 degrees latitudinal line cuts through Nordauslandet, and the next major one being 90 degrees, which is up the North Pole itself. So flights fly into Longyearbyen, which is the administrative capital of Svalbard. Spitsbergen is the 1920 Spitsbergen Treaty gave sovereignty of Svalbard to Norway, although the other signatories of the treaty have retained sovereignty of their own settlements. But Russia's got a few settlements, for example, in Barentsburg and Pyramiden. You land here in Longyearbyen, and say this is the little capital of Spitsbergen, of Svalbard. Small place named after the American John Longyear, who bought the mining rights to the area in 1900. So you spend well, you do actually spend a night here. You spend a night in Oslo, and you fly up to Longyearbyen. But you've got a few hours to wander around Longyearbyen, have a look at the town, maybe do a little bit of bird watching. And even before you've boarded your ship, you're going to see some interesting birds up here. There are purple sandpipers to top left in this photo. Plenty of Arctic terns top right. A bird that has one of the longest migrations of any bird in the world. These birds spend their summer up in the high Arctic, and then for the winter, for our winter, they fly down to the austral summer down in the southern hemisphere, and winter off of Antarctica. And then there are also plenty of common eider around, and the delightful little snow bunting, which is a common actually nests in Longyearbyen itself, and it's the only real passerine to regularly breed up in Svalbard. You get the occasional wheatear, occasional Lapland bunting, but snow buntings are common. And these birds, interestingly, tend to winter down on the Russian steppes rather than flying south into Europe. This is the boat that we use for our Spitsbergen cruises. It's the MS Quest. It takes about 50 people. Very comfortable, ice strengthened ship that can take you out into the pack ice. And we take full charter of Quest. So we fill the ship up with Naturetrek clients, send along 3 or 4 Naturetrek tour leaders, and we join the other expedition staff on board. And we run the trip as a dedicated wildlife and landscape type holiday, focusing in particular on the wildlife. We go in end of June, early July time, which is the best time really for the wildlife. It's by this point, the ice is normally melted sufficiently so you can get around into the interesting areas of Svalbard, but hasn't melted too much that you don't get the opportunity to go out into the ice and see some of the real key wildlife of the region. It's not a luxurious ship, but it's a very comfortable vessel. There are 3 or 4 different types of cabin grades. Top left is the standard twin cabin. They're all en suite. You've got some double-bedded cabins top right, and some larger superior cabins as well bottom left. And one of the great things about Quest is that the ship has this observation lounge up on one of the upper decks, with the panorama windows going all the way around the edge. So when you're not outside on the deck looking for the wildlife, you can have a cup of coffee, cup of tea up in the panorama lounge and still watch the world go by. And the ship also has enough Zodiacs, the rubber inflatable landing craft that we use to go on shore, for everyone to leave the ship at the same time. So there's no need to queue. We head out to Longyearbyen, head normally up the west coast of Spitsbergen, passing this wonderful landscape of glaciers and rocky hills, beautiful bays and glaciers. The tundra here, and you get more tundra on the western side of Spitsbergen because the Gulf Stream peters out along the west coast of Spitsbergen, meaning it's that tiny little bit more milder on the west coast and the east. So in the tundra and that sort of land area, you get some really lovely birds. Sarah showed you the grey and red-necked phalaropes down in Baja in their winter plumage. Well, up in Spitsbergen, you get the beautiful grey phalaropes in their breeding finery. And you can see now why the Americans and Canadians call them red phalaropes in the breeding plumage. There's wonderful brick red colour. And this is a female top right, the females being brighter than the males. King eider, top left is the phalarope, top right, king eider. Barnacle geese, bottom left, and red-throated diver. And the barnacle geese, this is the population that winter down on the Solway Firth in Scotland. So the entire Svalbard population go and winter down on the Solway in the winter time. A wonderful long-tailed skua. It's quite a rare bird up in Spitsbergen because over the rest of their range they feed on lemmings, but there are no lemmings up in Svalbard. But there's still a couple of few pairs dotted around, and we know where to look for these really very graceful and delicate birds. In the brief summer, in Spitsbergen, the tundra just bursts into a wonderful kaleidoscope of different colors. Purple saxifrage here is one of the commonest flowers you'll get to see in Svalbard, a very rare flower in the United Kingdom and UK, but common in Spitsbergen in the summertime, along with a variety of other different saxifrage species as well. Beautiful boreal Jacob's ladder, another key flower to look out for. And we always make sure that one of the Naturetrek staff on board is a botanist. So if your interest is in botany as well as the other wildlife, you can be sure there'll be somebody there to identify the flowers for you. And a rare species that the botanists always get very excited about is the whiplash saxifrage, also known as the spider plant. So from plants to mammals, there's only really 2 species of land mammal on Svalbard. If you ignore the sibling vole, which were released there a couple of decades ago, you've got the Svalbard reindeer here. It is a particular subspecies endemic to the archipelago, almost like Shetland ponies, like short-legged Shetland ponies with antlers, but they're common throughout the archipelago. And we'll see plenty of Svalbard reindeers on our trip. Some fantastic seabird colonies as well. One of the real highlights of a trip to Svalbard is the vast colonies of Brunix guillemots and other seabirds. This is a place called Alkenfjell at Cape Fanshawe. We have these huge dolerite columns rising vertically out of the sea, covered from top to bottom in thousands and thousands of pairs of Brunix guillemots. And you're enveloped in this wonderful blizzard of wings when you go and you cruise along the base of the colony in the zodiacs. And a close-up here of the Brunix guillemot. This is the high Arctic auk, very similar in its looks to the common guillemot we get down here, but they have the wide slash along the bill line. They're a bit darker, slightly different shape as well. And there's over 850,000 pairs of Brunix guillemots nesting in Svalbard. And the other abundant, super abundant auk up here is the small little tennis ball size little auk. There's probably over 1 million pairs of little auks breed up in Svalbard, and they're one of the commonest birds you'll see on the cruise. There's always line after line of little auks flying backwards and forwards from the sea back to land. And we'll take you to a colony and you'll get to see these wonderfully endearing little birds perched on the rocks and flying around you. And they have this incredible maniacal laugh, which is so bizarre and really fantastic experience to be in a colony with these birds whizzing around, making this cackling noise as they go. And whenever you're around a seabird colony, you need to keep your eyes open for that other Arctic land mammal, the Arctic fox. And in the summertime, they will home in on seabird colonies to scavenge on the eggs and chicks, and it's the best place to look for them. And they're commonly seen at Cape Fanshawe, that Brunix guillemot colony. Be very unlucky not to see Arctic foxes. In fact, this particular fox here was high up on the cliff at Cape Fanshawe, wandering around, trying his luck with the guillemots. And in the wintertime, they head out on the ice and follow polar bears, and they scavenge on polar bear kills. But as well as the wildlife, it's this fabulous landscapes up in Svalbard that never cease to amaze. It's one of many glaciers that we'll see on the trip. And so once we've head north, we'll head round to the eastern side of Svalbard, and it's here in the north and the east where the ice tends to linger longest in the summertime. And we'll head out into the ice in the ice strengthened ship. The landscapes up here are a bit more different. You get heading to the east, where in a region that's more dominated by the East Spitsbergen current, a cold Arctic current that comes down from further north. So you've lost a lot of the tundra and you're into a more polar desert type landscape. But this area has its own special birds to look out for. The beautiful Sabine's gull, a rare breeder up in Spitsbergen, probably no more than 5 or 10 pairs breed up here, but very, very easy and distinctive bird with the black, white and grey patterning in the wings here. And wouldn't really be a trip cruise to the Arctic without that opportunity to head out into the pack ice. And one of the great things about the quest is that it can go out into the ice, and it's ice strength, and can get you out into this wonderful environment to look for some of the real special animals and birds of the high Arctic. So the beautiful ivory gull lives out in the pack ice. And again, like the Arctic foxes, they will often follow polar bears and scavenge on the kills. There are plenty of seals out here as well. This is a bearded seal, one of the larger of the species. And wherever you get the seals, that's when you need to be looking out for the polar bear. Of course, the iconic mammal of the Arctic. They're fully protected in Svalbard. They haven't been hunted for many decades. And there's a Barents Sea population of about 2,000 individuals who's wandered from Svalbard across to the Russian islands and back again. Of course, we can't guarantee any wildlife on any of our trips, but we've always been very fortunate with polar bears. And in the 20 odd years of us operating trips to Svalbard, we've only missed them on one occasion. But of course, this is wildlife. There are no guarantees. In the summertime, summer is tough for polar bears. It's their time of plenty is in the winter when they're out hunting for seals. But they're often stranded on land during the summertime when the ice has retreated, and there they have to scavenge on eggs and carcasses and other things they can find. I should say that there has been some new rulings and new regulations recently brought in Svalbard. So from the 1st of January next year, all operators now have to stay a minimum of 500 meters from a polar bear. So that is a new ruling that's been brought in. It may change over the next couple of years or so, but the new ruling to reduce as much as possible the disturbance on these amazing animals, have to remain, say, 500 meters away. But as well as the bears, there's some other wonderfully iconic species in the high Arctic. The walrus is the largest of the seal, this pinniped species. The male tusks can grow up to a meter in length. They were very heavily hunted back in the 17th, 18th centuries, but luckily, again, they've been protected for a long time, and their population is on the up. So cetaceans, Svalbard is not the cetacean mecca as Baja is, but you stand a good chance of seeing a couple of species, 2 or 3 species up here. Beluga whales are seen certainly with some regularity. Blue whales are being seen more and more up in Svalbard as their population fortunately increases after the hunting, the years of hunting. The numbers are coming up, and they're being seen more regularly up in the Arctic waters. But the real rarity to get, and you have to be very fortunate to see this one, is the bowhead whale. So we've only seen bowhead on, I think, two occasions on our Spitsbergen cruises. The last one being this year. Actually, we're very fortunate to find a bowhead whale on our Spitsbergen cruise in 2024. And as well as the landscapes and the history, and so landscapes and the wildlife, there's some really interesting history up here as well. It was from Svalbard that Rowan Amundsen and Umberto Nobile left in their airship on the very first crossing of the Arctic by air, and that was in 1926. And the tower where they tied up their airship is still actually there, and you can visit that at the Ellison. But there's lots of really interesting history up here as well as the wildlife. And again, it's just the landscapes, the whole experience of being up in the Arctic with this fantastic vista in front of you and some wonderful wildlife. And you don't need to worry about the day length either. There's plenty of time to enjoy your trip up to Spitsbergen, because the sun never sets. In the summer, this is as low as the sun will get in the sky. And so you're blessed with 24-hour daylight, and the only problem really is finding the opportunity to actually sleep. So I'm running a little bit late due to that little technical hitch to start with, so I'll motor on and take you down to the other extremity of our planet, from the Arctic right down to Antarctica. And again, we've been running Antarctic cruises for many years now. We do our Spitsbergen cruise every year, but Antarctica we tend to do a charter every 2 to 3 years or so. So we did a charter this year in 2024, and our next one will be in 2027. So this one, you have to travel a little bit further than you do to Spitsbergen. We'll fly down to Buenos Aires in Argentina, and then from there down to Ushuaia on the southern tip of the South American continent. And from there, we then head out to the Falkland Islands, South Georgia, and the Antarctic Peninsula on an 18-night cruise. We start off in Ushuaia, so right down the southern tip of South America, where the Andes Mountains drop into the sea. Wonderful landscapes here. Some interesting birds such as kelp goose can be seen just on the waterfront outside the hotel. And we'll take you on a little trip into Tierra del Fuego National Park as well. Wonderful park of mountains and lakes clothed in southern beech forest and home to some lovely birds such as the Magellanic woodpecker. Overhead, there are Andean condors flying, so it's a nice little introduction to South American birding before we board our ship, the MV Ortelius, for the 18-night cruise. The Ortelius is a little bit bigger than Quest, but we want a slightly bigger ship to tackle those southern seas, which can be a little bit lumpy at times. The Ortelius takes about 100 people. Again, ice strengthened, comfortable, and a range of different cabin types. So top left, you've got the standard twin cabin, a superior cabin on top right, twin deluxe bottom left, and the dining room. So again, a nice ship to call home. Plenty of deck space. We always like to go for ships with lots of outside deck space because Naturetrek clients like to be out on board, looking out on deck, looking at the wildlife and the landscapes. So our cruise, say, starts in Ushuaia, goes to the Falklands, down to South Georgia, and then down to the Antarctic Peninsula, and that's an 18-night cruise in total. The whole trip is about 23, 24 days once you take travel and a few nights here and there on land. But heading out to sea doesn't take long before you start to see your first seabirds. Black-browed albatross here, one of the most commonest albatross you'll see on the cruise. But there's lots of other petrels and prions and shearwaters to enjoy on this trip. We'll make sure the Naturetrek leaders on board know their seabirds. So if you want something to stick next to the Naturetrek guide, and they'll be pointing out the great shearwater, the right-hand bird here. The top left is white-chinned petrel, and bottom left is Wilson's storm petrel, one of the most abundant seabirds in the world. And after a day's crossing, we arrive at the Falkland Islands, which is it's an interesting place. It's a stepping stone to South Georgia. We may swing past adjacent islands, top left of the map, if we get the time, but typically we land on Carcass Island and Saunders Island, and then the following day move over to Port Stanley for the morning. So each day we'll land by Zodiac, these rubber inflatable landing craft, and you'll do typically a landing in the morning and a landing in the afternoon as well. On Saunders Island, we'll take you to a colony of black-browed albatrosses, so you can get wonderfully close to these amazing birds and have them flying around over your heads. You'll see the first penguin species on the Falklands. We've got gentoo penguins here, line of gentoos walking along the beach, and the comical southern rockhopper penguin, which we'll see at a colony. And there are a few king penguins dotted around as well. Just a taster for when we get across to South Georgia. There's a few land birds to see, a beautiful long-tailed meadowlark, and the striated caracara, known locally as the Johnny Rook, which is an endemic bird to the Falkland Islands. The Falklands have a few endemics like Cobb's wren as well. And there'll be time, as I said, spend a morning in Port Stanley, which has a population of only 2,500 people, and you can visit its famous church with the whalebone arch. From the Falklands, we head out to sea once again on the 2-day crossing to South Georgia. Plenty of albatrosses and other seabirds to enjoy on the crossing. This is a wandering albatross, a young wanderer, the largest of the species with the longest wingspan of any species of bird. At some point as well, we'll cross the what's known as the Antarctic convergence. The Falklands lies on the northern side of the convergence and South Georgia on the southern side. And it's here that the cold northward flowing Antarctic waters meet the slightly warmer waters of the sub-Antarctic. There's a lot of mixing and nutrients brought to the surface. And so it's a really good area for seabirds. And as you cross the convergence, the seas get colder and you start to pick up a different suite of seabirds, including black-bellied storm petrel here, and just to start to see your first icebergs as well. As we near South Georgia, we pass Shag Rocks, so 6 small little rocky islets on the westernmost extremity of the islands, and then we arrive at South Georgia itself. And these are some of the key landing spots on South Georgia. It's absolutely fabulous island, and I was fortunate to go down there a few years ago. I think for me it was the highlight of the entire cruise. Very highlight packed cruise it was. We'll land at Grytviken to get the ship needs to get its paperwork stamped, and everybody needs to be checked over for make sure they're not bringing any foreign bodies into South Georgia. They're very, very strict on biosecurity on the islands. But you'll get to see your first Antarctic fur seals here. And plenty of southern elephant seals as well. So these are southern elephant seals, different to the northern elephant seals that Sarah showed you earlier. And there's also the opportunity to visit the grave of one of the history's great polar explorers, Sir Ernest Shackleton. And he led the trans-Antarctic expedition in the early 20th century, intended to cross Antarctica from sea to sea, but the ship was crushed by the ice and sank, and he had to get his men back home across the most inhospitable terrain imaginable. He got them eventually up to a place called Elephant Island, and then from there he took essentially a rowing boat from Elephant Island back to South Georgia, and then sent a rescue ship to get his men. He didn't lose one person on that expedition, despite the extreme hardship they went through. Absolutely amazing story. Anyway, and so it's traditional just to raise a glass to the boss, and the crew used to call him the boss. It's a traditional thing when you get to South Georgia. There's some wonderful wildlife here, of course, as well to see. Yellow-billed pintail is commonly seen. Some fantastic landscapes as you're cruising along the south edge of South Georgia. You see these wonderful mountains and glaciers. The light mantled sooty albatross is probably the most attractive of all the albatross species, and they're commonly seen as you cruise around South Georgia. You might be lucky enough to see the males and females engaged in a display flight where they mirror each other as they're flying back and forth. There's over 3 million pairs of macaroni penguins on the islands, and several million pairs of king penguins as well. And one of the real highlights is to go to a massive king penguin colony such as St Andrews Bay here. Over 250,000 breeding pairs of king penguins crammed onto this one beach at St Andrews Bay, and it is absolutely mind-blowing experience just to stand and experience this place. Loads of chinstrap penguins as well nest on the islands, and as you're cruising around the waters, you'll be looking for whales, hopefully humpback whales. This is a southern right whale, one of the rarer species to look out for, but seen with some regularity around South Georgia. So the only songbird in the Antarctic waters is the South Georgia pipit, a bird that was the numbers of which are increasing following the eradication of rats on the island back in 2018. And after enjoying some fabulous days on South Georgia, we head south down to the Antarctic Peninsula itself. Again, you'll enjoy some wonderful seabirds. There's wandering albatross here, prions in the background, Antarctic prion in the background. You'll start to see some of those real polar species, such as snow petrel, on the left and Antarctic petrel on the right. There's only been 3 species of bird that's been recorded at the geographical North Pole, and these are 2 of them, snow petrel and Antarctic petrel, the other one being South Polar skua. And these 2 species of petrel actually nest on nunatuks, which are sort of bare rocky mountain tips poking out of the ice. It's quite a rare bird to see, but when I was down there in 2016, we found this iceberg absolutely covered in Antarctic petrels and snow petrels. Quite a sight. We try and visit Elephant Island on our cruises, and they did manage to get there this year. And this is the island where Shackleton left his men before we headed north up to South Georgia to get help. And it's also, as well as having this incredible history to it, a great area to watch cetaceans, whales and dolphins and penguins as well. So we head down, say, to the Antarctic Peninsula. We're only really, Antarctic Peninsula is a vast place. So we're only, in our time that we have, sort of poking around the top of the peninsula, going just down into the Weddell Sea, and if we've got the time, maybe going down the western coast of the Antarctic Peninsula as well, before heading back towards Ushuaia through the South Shetland Islands, as you can see on the arrows on the map here. The landscapes here are just absolutely jaw-droppingly fabulous. Massive glaciers, huge mountains covered in ice. There really is nowhere like it in the world. And we'll take you out on the Zodiacs to explore this amazing vista, and probably seeing whales and other wildlife as we're going. A Adelie penguin is one of the only two species of penguin that actually only breed on the Antarctic continent, and that's the Adelie and the Emperor. And then we'll take you to a big colony of Adelies, and wherever you've got colonies of Adelies, you've got to keep your eyes open for the predators of the southern of the Antarctic realm, the very reptilian looking leopard seal and orcas as well. And there are 5 different types of what's called ecotypes of orca that occur in and around Antarctica. They're all at the moment lumped together into one species, but they may well be split into several in years to come. Each vary slightly in size and structure and have a different habits and different food. And the commonest whale down Antarctica, the commonest large whale that is the humpback whale, and we should hopefully see plenty of those on our voyage. And we'll make sure that you get the opportunity to set foot on the Antarctic continent, as well as, of course, visiting and doing some Zodiac cruises as well. We head back out from the Antarctic continent itself and cross over to the South Shetland Islands just for a couple of landings before heading back across the ocean to Maine and South America. South Shetland has large colonies, in particular of chinstrap penguins. So chances are you'll hit a little bit of lumpy sea on this cruise. I'll just go back to this particular crossing. The winds got up to about 100 miles an hour at this point, but don't think you're going to get it all the time. Drake's Passage may be a notoriously lumpy bit of water, but this was the crossing we had back in 2016. Barely a ripple on the surface. Well, there was so little wind around that all the sooty shearwaters were sitting on the sea. But even for those who get a little bit seasick at times, it still is worth doing. It's such an amazing place, fantastic landscapes, fantastic wildlife, and probably the ultimate of all wildlife cruises. So I will end there and just say thank you very much for listening. As I mentioned, our next cruise is in 2027 on the 16th of January, and we've still got quite a few berths, cabins left. So please join us, and any questions, let me know. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks so much, Paul. Absolutely loved that. Having been to both places, it was just lovely to just sort of relive it through all of those photos. And I can definitely clarify or back up with what Paul was saying about the humpback whales being so abundant down in Antarctica. We counted 200 individuals and then lost count because we just had so many that we couldn't keep track of while we were having dinner and looking out the windows, and just humpback whales all around us. Absolutely Absolutely fabulous. And we'll now take questions, folks. If you'd like to put questions in the Q&A section, I don't see any submitted so far, or you can just pop them in the chat.
Well, I think one just came into chat and then disappeared.
Yeah, so that is, are there extensions available on the Antarctica tour?
Yes, is a simple answer to that. We can certainly extend the trip for you, as we can do really with any of our holidays. So you could have a bit of time in Buenos Aires and good birding around Buenos Aires. We could take you up to Iguazu Falls, maybe. There's more things to do around Ushuaia. There's Los Glaciares National Park. So yes, basically yes, there's quite a few different options, and we'd be happy to look into that for you.
Got some nice comments coming in. Thank you, Peter. Just commenting. Thank you both so much. Fabulous trips. Really glad you enjoyed it. Paul, a question that we often get asked is, what tips do you have for wildlife photography when photographing animals on a cruise, at sea, particularly in the polar regions? Do you have any advice for people?
Well, I'm no great photographer myself, but the camera I take, it normally has a zoom lens, 100 to 300 zoom lens, so you've got a bit of you've got a bit of magnification for smaller things. For if you're photographing albatrosses and seabirds out at sea, you've got a big bit of magnification for that. But if you're also photographing the whales and the seals, you can zoom back out again. Yeah.
I think also having
I'll
a
leave that one to you, Sarah. I'm no photography expert
Well, I
myself.
think also having a polarizing lens, a fair filter, can be really helpful as well, especially for cutting the glare on bright white snow and things like that. And yeah, good lens sort of kit, as you've just said. I had a 100 to 400 when I was in Antarctica. And just having a good fast shutter speed if you're trying to take photographs of fast moving birds. But the opportunities are fantastic, aren't they? Because the birds, particularly the albatross, they're quite tame. They'll come around the boat and you just got repeated opportunities to be getting good photographs of them.
And a good landscape lens is essential as well.
Mm.
For the fantastic landscapes, and also the penguin. When you're on shore, the penguins are so close that you don't really need much of a telephoto, because they will wander right up to you and just
You find yourself sort of backing up, don't you? Just well, it's a nice problem to have when the wildlife is too close, I suppose. Can't complain. One tip that I would say that I learned from being in Antarctica earlier this year is when you're going from being in a lovely warm cabin to straight outside in the cold air and coming back into a cabin, and this is the reverse when I'm in the tropics in an air-conditioned cabin, lovely and cold, going outside in the humidity in Indonesia. You get condensation very quickly on your lens with a change in temperature. So a really handy thing to take is a plastic sort of Ziploc bag, or just it doesn't even really need to be that locked, but just something that you can kind of close easily and just let it adjust more quickly, more slowly, I mean, to the changing temperature. I've had some lovely comments coming in, thanking you. It was wonderful. Thank you both. Thanks, Amanda. And we've got some folk coming to our open day on Friday. Fabulous. Thanks, Gary. We look forward to seeing you there. And I don't know if we don't have any more questions. So if there's nothing further to say, folks, then I'll just say thank you all so much for joining us. We'll hope you join us for our subsequent presentations as well, all of which can be viewed on our website, and you'll receive a link to join them tomorrow. Our next one will be on the 6th of January on Andalusia and Morocco. And we have many more that month as well. So don't worry about missing any in the run up to Christmas if you're busy. We've put them all in the new year for you to look forward to brighten those dark evenings. So until then, thanks very much for joining, folks. And we'll see you next time. If you have any other questions in the meantime, you think of something later, just email us in the office and we'll be happy to reply, or just give us a call. So I hope to see you all in January, and take care.
Thank you very much, and good evening. Good evening. Thank you.